we all learn in different ways. If you think about it, Wayne Dyer might not attract everybody.
And everything in between.
Mission was really to help people just to reach their full potential.
The Brad Wiseman Show. And now, your host, Brad Wiseman.
All right. I am so excited about this show.
What is it?
What is it? I'm not going to tell you. You got to guess. You got to guess what it is. No, we have a really good show here for you, as we normally do, I think. We always put on some good shows here. But we have a really good guest. It's a guest that I've been looking at for quite some time. And, you know, it caught my eye. There was his manager, the people that help him with his social media and get him out there on podcasts, had reached out to me and, you know, looked at his what they call it like a one pager, and it just hit me right away. I mean, he has this organization called the Dad Nation.
Dad Nation.
Yeah, Dad Nation, which is, you know, we're dads. You're a dad. I'm a dad.
Right.
And it hit me. And then I started reading some of the quotes and stuff on Instagram. And I was like, I got to get this. This guy's got to be on the show.
Well,
So his name is Mitchell Osmond. Mitchell, how you doing, man?
My friend, I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be on the show and chatting with you guys today.
Yeah, awesome. You're all the way from Canada.
Mm-hmm. The friendly
Yeah.
neighbor from the north, man.
Are you cold yet up there?
Nah, it's starting to get a little bit chilly, but we're good. We're still hanging on.
Still hanging on. We're still hanging on. That's good. We all know snow's coming at some point, so not much we can do about that. But I know you really caught my eye. You have this this whole thing called the Dad Nation, which I think is very catchy, and I think it really drew me in. You know, as soon as I saw the name, and I'm just going to say a little. I'm just going to say a little bit. It's like a little bio, a little snippet here, but it says you're the founder of Dad Nation, host of a globally ranked podcast reaching over 33 listeners each month, which is pretty amazing. Your story is not just authentic, it's lived. In just 18 months, you lost 60 pounds, paid off over $100,000 in debt to achieve financial freedom, turned a near divorce into a thriving marriage, and launched a six-figure executive coaching practice alongside that top 10% show that you have. That's a lot. And I, you know, I read that, and then I started reading everything else, and I was like, yeah, gotta have this guy on. So tell me, how did you get to creating this Dad Nation?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, first of all, Brad, thank you for having me on the show. I'm just really excited to be here. And real quick, though, before we jump in, I noticed you said I have 33 monthly listeners. I just wanted to correct and just say
Did
it's
I say
33.
33?
Yes, you did.
Did I say 30?
I thought that too. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's not many. That's not many.
Well, you know, I was trying to make ourselves look good, Hugo.
Terrible.
It is 33,000 listeners each
Nice.
month. Sorry
There you
about
go.
that. buddy.
It's all
Nice.
good, man.
So glad you actually corrected me on that. Oh, man, that's funny. So 33,000 listeners is definitely a lot more than 33.
There you
And
go.
that's amazing, actually. It's really incredible. So, yeah, tell us about the Dad Nation. Tell us about how this became 33,000 listeners a month.
Yeah, well, if you'd like, I mean, I can start from the origin story about kind of my turning point that kind of led
Yes.
me to get to this point.
Absolutely.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll try and keep this short, but because I think it's a great place to start. And a lot of people ask me this, well, how did you get from there to here, right? And so for me, there were two critical points, okay? Two turning points. One was a fight and the other one was a funeral. Okay, so we'll start with the fight. Now, if you can picture me and my wife were sitting on the couch in the living room one day, and man, it all hit the fan. Like, we got into a fight about money, and that morphed into, you know, about me working too much, not being present. And then it just started to spiral. And at this point, we had been married for about 3 years, and it
Wow.
was a tough 3 years, you know, of struggling. Now, but this fight, this day was our
Children or
rock-
no children at this
no
point?
children at this point. No.
Okay.
This was our rock bottom. Now, we fought all the time, but this one was different. And I knew that today, this one, I was like, man, I don't think that I can fix this one. Deep down, I kind of knew that if something didn't change, I was going to lose my wife.
Oh,
And to give you some more context, I'd recently been let go of a senior leadership position. And, you know, especially as men, you know, our career is everything to us. You know, it was my calling, my identity. I spiraled into depression. Like you had said, 60 pounds overweight, 100 grand in debt, medicating, you know, with drugs and alcohol, just trying to cope. And now I was getting dangerously close to divorce. Man, I was checked out, stressed out, burned out, like all the outs,
Yeah.
you know,
right.
and just and I was perplexed with this tension, Brad, of like, why was it that I could see success professionally, but I couldn't figure my life out personally? You know, I could lead teams, I could cast vision, I could run board meetings, But when I came home, I didn't even know how to talk to my own wife. And it was such a tension that I was living in. So to bring it back even more, I'd come from a dysfunctional upbringing. I had a non-existent relationship with my father, alcoholism, drugs, crime, which is a part of my life growing up. It was littered throughout my family. And I was kind of caught in the middle of it all. So I knew what I didn't want, right?
Yeah.
I knew where it came from, but for the life of me, man, I kept getting sucked in to those old behaviors, and caught, like, sucked into just the past, reliving the mistakes of my father and his father. And when I would yell at my wife, I could hear his voice in mine. I could hear his words.
Oh,
And there
wow.
was this duality, man, that I felt like I was like living a lie, because I would see, like I said, I'd see the success professionally, but I would come home and there was just this tension, right? And so, for me, that was a critical point. My wife said to me, she said, "You go to work and you give everyone the Mitchell buffet, and you come home and you give me the scraps, and I'm
Oh,
done."
wow.
Yeah. And so 7 days later, the end of that same week was the second point, and this was the funeral part of the story. Now, I was invited to sing at the funeral of this he was a philanthropist, very successful man. And I was strapping on my guitar, getting ready to sing the last song. And I heard the minister say to the room, he said, "Are you living a life worthy of imitation?" Because he was talking about all the things this guy had done.
Yeah.
And he said, "If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the legacy that you left?" And Brad, as I was wrapping up and trying to sing the last song, I could barely choke out the lyrics, because all I could think in that moment was, man, if this were my funeral, no one would be saying he inspired me to have an amazing marriage, or he inspired me to get into shape, or he inspired me to, get my money in order, get my house in order. They probably would have said at that point, he struggled and then it was over, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, Brad, in that moment, like, people were telling stories about this man, because that's what we do when someone passes away. And his life was filled with incredible chapters. And so I was determined that day that I would go home and begin to rewrite chapters for me, that I was going to take the pen back and rewrite my future. Because up until that point, the first chapter of my life was my childhood, and that was a sad one. The second chapter of my life was my marriage, and that was a big struggle. And so I decided, man, I have to die to the man that I used to be to become the man that I know I need to be for my wife and for my family. And so I knew, and we know this. If you want different results, you have to make different decisions. That's the old Einstein's old definition of
Yeah.
insanity, right?
Yeah. Doing the
Expect
same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what I did, Brad, was and again, I actually ended up building frameworks around this, but I did this intuitively, but now I understand the significance of it. I just started reaching out to men in my life that were ahead of me, right? Men who my ceiling was their floor. You understand what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
And these men surrounded me, and these guys were thriving in their marriage, they're thriving in business, they're thriving in their fitness, you name it. And they taught me everything I needed to know. They showed me what was possible, right, for my life. And they held me to the standard that I said I wanted for myself. And like you said in the intro, within 18 months, paid off the 100 grand, restored my marriage, lost 60 pounds, and was clean of substances and distractions. And so what's interesting about that is, because I was always in public positions of leadership, people started asking questions like, "What are you doing, man? How did you do all this?"
Yeah.
And so I
Right.
started helping people in my life, just friends of mine who are having a hard time, or putting budgets together to help them get out of debt, or making meal plans for them. And then one of my mentors challenged me. He said, "Man, if you really want to have impact, you need to start a podcast and start sharing with people what you've learned and just tell your story." And so I launched the Dad Nation podcast about a year and a half ago.
Cool.
And then within about 6 months, it was a globally top rated 10% podcast. And then I had people sending me messages from across North America saying, "Hey, would you help? Could you help me in my situation?" And that's when I decided to launch the coaching practice. And that's what I do today, man. I help high performing men reclaim their home, their health, and happiness without sacrificing their career success. And I
Yeah.
would argue that today you can have the business, you can have the income, and you can still see your son's soccer games or go to your daughter's dance recital. You can do it. Not a lot of people are doing it well, but doesn't mean you can't. And so that's
Yeah.
my story, man. That's
And
how I
why
got here.
why do we I struggle with everything you're talking about. Every single thing. My wife listens to this. She's gonna be like, I'm telling you, man, this is gonna be a conversation. I struggle with every single thing that you're talking about. Every single
Mm,
thing. So when you're talking, it's like you're talking to me.
mm,
I think I don't, and I know this because I have other friends that are very much a workaholic, whatever you want to call it. I'm very into success or moving forward and making money and things like that. And some of the reasons too link back from my parents were great, but the only fight they ever had was about money.
mhm,
So when you grow up with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love my parents; they're awesome people. But that was what the fights were about. So in my mind, it was always, I am going to do everything I can in a relationship to never fight about money.
mhm.
So I think is that the common one, is the money thing? Why do we put ourselves in this situation? Why are we not present at home the way we should be?
Yeah, such a good question and a great place to start because this is the great irony about this, man, about being a man, especially being a high performer, someone who's really career driven, is because we work so hard to provide this life for the family. But in many cases, statistically, it's shown that we actually will end up losing the family we're working so hard to provide for because we actually lose the family and because we work so much. You
Yeah.
understand what I mean?
Yeah,
And then
totally
what
get it.
happens is we get disconnected from our kids, we get disconnected from our wife, and then they say, "Well, where are you? What you work too much." And then you say, "Well, I'm just trying to provide. This is what I do." And then you feel disrespected because you're just trying to provide, and then she feels unloved. So then she starts, you know what I mean? So you get caught in this cycle.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge of being a man and who wants to provide financially and wants to work hard. And I'll tell you the reason why is we lose focus. Okay, so let me talk about the masculine versus the feminine for a moment. Now, when I talk about this, I'm talking about the essence, right? Not necessarily the gender, but specifically, we know that generally men are more masculine than women. We have
Yeah,
more
we have to be
masculine.
careful these days, what we say.
Exactly.
You have to be careful.
Hence my
Uh,
tiptoeing.
I can
Um,
tell you're tiptoeing, and you're doing a great job, by the way. Do you
so
have
there's
eggshells under you?
right? Feels like it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you want to think about the essence of masculinity. It's driven by performance. It's driven by excellence. It's driven by purpose, by
Mm,
mission, right? The
mhm.
feminine is driven by emotions. It's driven by nurturing, relationships, intuition, all these different things. A buddy of mine said the masculine is doing, the feminine is being. And I think that's a beautiful, real simple explanation. But what happens is we get sort of caught in this trap is we find a lot of our validation through what we do as men, right? And it fulfills something in us because we're masculine. And so for example, let's think about it this way. If you go to a Super Bowl party, this is on display. It makes it so easy to see. Where do you typically see the men that are at the party?
In front of the TV.
Exactly. Now, they're in front of the TV. They're watching the athletes doing what they do best because athletes are some of the most purpose driven. They're on a mission. They're excellent at what they do. They have very clear purpose. We're like moths to a flame. We're drawn to it because we can also quantify it because sports, you can tell good, bad, medium, whatever.
Yeah.
Where are the women usually at the Super Bowl party?
Chatting over at the bar.
Exactly. Chatting around the table, sipping a
Around the
glass of
table.
wine,
Yes, exactly.
right? Asking, "Hey, how are the kids? How's Brad doing?" They're nurturing their relationships. They're connecting emotionally. And that's just a part of the feminine expression. But here's where this we have to be careful is because men, and now that we understand our wiring, we go to work all day and we fix things and we provide solutions and we strategize all day for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, however long you work. And it's totally in alignment with our essence as men, and it's our skill set because we get really good at it. We come home to a woman who loves us, but could give a rip about strategy or about excellence or purpose or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And what happens is we start treating our wives like employees or staff
Mm.
members. We start treating our kids like our colleagues, right? And because that's what we do all day. And so when our wife talks about having a bad day or something's going on, she wants to be connected with emotionally, but all we start to do is try to fix things because that's what we've been doing all day. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, of course I'm going to fix this. Then she gets upset because she's like, no, you're not hearing me.
Hey guys, I want to take a second and thank Comfort Pro. Since 2001, Comfort Pro has been helping customers stay comfortable where they live, work, and play. They have 24/7 emergency service and a 100% customer satisfaction guarantee. If you need help with your heating and air conditioning or indoor air quality, call Comfort Pro at 484-917-1803. Mention the show and receive a free humidifier with the installation of a complete system.
I just want you to hear me. And you're like, I am hearing you. I'm just trying to fix it. And she's like, I
So
don't want.
are you watching our house with a camera and a microphone, or I'm just wondering, like, this is getting creepy now. It's really getting creepy. No, but you're so right.
Yeah.
She'll start to share, and then then it's like, well, Sally did this and whatever. I'm like, well, Sally needs to understand her play. I start going into the fix mode, and well, why is Sally doing that? And yeah, exactly.
But what happens is you start shoving a strategy down her throat.
Yeah.
And that's not what she needs. Or at least you're trying to formulate one that she can take to Sally.
Yeah.
She's like, I just need to sit and feel this for a moment. And
Yeah.
as a man, you're like, what are you talking about? Why would you ever want to feel that? Like, just fix it. Right. And so
right.
a buddy of mine said this analogy, which I think is brilliant. Sometimes that male expression, when they come home and they have to sort of listen to, maybe it's their daughter or their wife, struggling with something, but yet not being able to fix it. They feel like it's like you're standing in front of a house that's up in flames, and you got this fire hose that's fully charged, and you got to just keep it turned off and just watch the house burn.
Yes.
That's sometimes what it feels like, right?
That's funny.
But
That's a good analogy.
Yeah. So what happens is there's this big disconnect, right? And so the husband feels like, man, a man's two greatest needs are to feel respected and to feel competent. Okay. So what happens is when the wife feels unheard or unloved or unseen, she starts to say things like, well, you're not hearing me. What are you, a robot? Like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you talk about your feelings, whatever? And you start to feel incompetent as a man in the house or as a husband. And so what happens, because we're driven by accomplishments, by tangible, tactical things, we can't quantify what success looks like at home. It's much harder, right? Like I tell my clients all the time, you're never going to come home and your 6-year-old son is not going to be like, hey, daddy, here are 5 reasons why you're an effective father. Like he's just not going to do that, right?
Right.
But when you go to work, you get performance bonuses, you close this many contracts, revenue is up last quarter, very easy to quantify, very easy to wrap strategies around. So at work, you're like, I know I'm being successful. I know I'm competent, and I'm usually respected by my colleagues or my boss or whatever. But when you come home, all those lines get blurry.
Oh yeah, because they're not going to pat you on the back for being at work.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's and I think sometimes that's what we look for. Like, you realize I just closed this much of a deal. That doesn't really matter because that's not what they're worried about.
And you come home all excited.
Yeah,
and they don't care.
And then they poo-poo the whole thing.
The whole thing.
The poo-poo the whole thing. It's all done. Yeah,
exactly. Because that is not a value.
Yeah.
For her. It's actually fundamentally not how she's wired. And that's by design, because her role and her responsibility is to be the nurturing, caring, loving, supportive, emotional sort of part of that relationship. That's the being sense, right?
Yeah.
And so that creates that emotional safety in the home. And so she's actually wired like that for a reason. But if we're not aware of that, what happens is those two strengths, the masculine and the feminine, which are incredible strengths and both are needed. There's a reason why we have opposite polarities. We end up pinning them against each other, and they end up pulling us apart. And so David Data says in his book, The Way of the Superior Man, he calls it the great masculine error. And he says this great masculine error is that you think that someday you're going to understand it, that one day you will understand your wife or you'll understand the feminine. But the reality is the masculine will forever be perplexed by the feminine, and the feminine will be perplexed by the masculine
The other way. Yeah.
until we understand how we're wired and how our strengths can serve one another. And so this is where this tension comes from, Brad. Why
Yeah.
you feel like such a success at work, and you come home and you don't even know where your place is. And when you do try and talk, you're like, you don't care what I'm talking about, and the solutions I'm offering, you don't seem to want to hear. So what am I doing here? Because this is
Yeah.
what I'm good at, right? And
Yeah.
you start to feel like a nuisance in your own home.
Yeah, interesting. Now, you talk about all this stuff, okay? What do you find to be the most challenging?
Uh, Everything we just talked about. It's funny because
I love the honesty, dude. I love it because we could all sit here. I mean, I could sit here and tell people like this is going to be taken a different way. I'm a realtor. I can tell somebody all day, hey, if you're thinking about buying something, make sure you get pre-approved. I mean, why would you not do that? Well, my wife and I went to buy a place at the beach 2 years ago, found the place, and guess what we didn't have done? Pre-approval. So I'm rushing around getting a pre-approval. But what's funny is sometimes we don't do what we tell others to do. But you're obviously, you're really on a high level with this stuff. So is it still always, do you have to make it, is it front of mind to think about, or does it become more natural to know how the difference between the masculine and feminine, and know why she's saying something a certain way, or why there's an argument about this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I tell you what. There's no. They're just skills that need to be developed. You need to have somebody that puts this in front of you, but you need to practice it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of my clients are like, they'll come to me like, "Man, I totally blew it again." I'm like, "Well, hey, how many times did you lose your cool this week?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, 4." I'm like, "Well, 4 is better than 7 because last week you were doing it every single day. That's a significant improvement." But the reality is, and the challenging part about this is, the only time you get to practice is when you're in the middle of the moment, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it gets so difficult. And so we got to understand, I can teach you skills and tools and frameworks on how to catch yourself in the moment. And I'd love to teach some of those in our conversation today to help your listeners. But at the end of the day, this is a skill that we have to develop, because generally speaking, men really struggle with their emotions. They really struggle with even understanding what's going on, but we're also married to emotional wizards, women who just like they were
Emotional.
raised with it, right? And
Yeah,
is an interesting term that I'll share with you. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's called normative male alexithymia. Okay, now this is a psychological term that has been coined to explain this phenomenon. Okay, so the term alexithymia, actually, its roots come from the Greek. Okay, so the word a means lack or without, and then the word thymos means without emotion or feelings. And so when you put, and then thymos means without emotions. And so when you put the words alexithymia together, it means a lack of words for emotion. So
All
what
right.
this means is, when men are pressed to talk about their feelings, when they're asked, well, what do you feel? Or what? And this is why we struggle so much in traditional therapy, is because we've been raised in a culture where we're actually uncomfortable talking about our emotions. And even if we did, we wouldn't necessarily have the words to talk about it. And so we marry very emotional beings who are very in tune with their emotions and they want to be connected with, but we literally don't have the words for it often. So what I do a lot of the times is I just teach men how to understand their emotions, talk about them, and communicate them clearly. Because what happens is, the reality is, men have just as many emotions as women, but we don't recognize them and talk about them or understand them. And so they bottle up, and all of a sudden, boom, they snap, because we're also masculine, so we can be aggressive, and that it becomes the only outlet. We either snap or we shut down. Both are not great options in a healthy marriage,
No,
right?
definitely not.
And so
Definitely not.
that's what I would say is it's a matter of learning these skills and then practicing them over time. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And the other thing too is, I think, I was married once before. So one of the things that I learned, I think anybody that goes through a divorce, anybody goes through any kind of a relationship, complete breakup, needs to understand it. I always said to people, I was 100% responsible, just as she was 100% responsible for us separating or getting divorced. And one of the things is that there's usually cues, there's usually hints, there's usually little things that they drop out there that as me as a guy didn't pick up on the cues. You know what I mean? Just didn't pick up on them. And I'll never
Mhm.
forget when she said she was leaving. I'll never forget going, "Oh, that's what that meant.
Mm.
Oh, I remembered that she said this." You start to realize that there was all kinds of clues and out there, but we're not built to pick that stuff up.
Mhm.
You know, we're just not. And it did make me a better person to be married to now. You know, I think it's a lot of it is just learning about yourself and learning
Mhm.
that, you need to listen to these things. You need to listen to when people say that you work too much, that maybe that means you work too much.
Mhm.
It's not just a complaint. It's something they're feeling.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting how those things work with relationships. But
Well,
luckily you were able to save your relationship, which is great.
yeah, and I tell you what, Brad, that's you talk about how we miss things.
Yeah.
That's by design because we're created to be able to compartmentalize. We're created to be able to let go and oversee and contain thoughts and move forward because we need to in order to be productive. We need to in order to press forward. And we've been literally built not just physically stronger, but emotionally stronger in the sense of we can compartmentalize, let things go, so that we can bear the weight for our families. We're designed to take the weight, not just physically, but emotionally and all those different things. So guys letting things go, that's actually part of our design.
Yeah.
And so it's not a bad thing, but we have to learn how to bridge that gap, right? And what you're saying is so key because there's a statistic, and this is part of the reason why I launched this whole movement, was because in the United States today, we know that 7 out of every 10 divorces are initiated by the women in the relationship.
Wow,
Okay.
that's interesting.
Now, and it gets crazier. In a situation where the wife is a high earner or she's got an education, that number goes to 9 out of 10 divorces are initiated by women. 90% of divorces are initiated by women. And of those 90%, 80% of the time the divorce is initiated, the reason cited is because they feel disconnected emotionally from their husband.
Mm. Unbelievable.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, right
So
there it
that's
is.
why I talk so
There
much
it
about the
is.
emotions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the proof is in the statistics. I mean, there right there it is. It's
Mhm.
incredible. And what's funny you said about the high when the woman is the high earner or whatever, it didn't change. It made it worse.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, because now she doesn't she the reason why some women stay in a relationship where they're maybe unhappy is because a lot of times is because the man
Financial.
is the primary provider.
Yeah.
And so I get a lot of women follow me on Instagram and sometimes they'll message me and be like if my husband didn't make so much money, I'd leave him.
Oh, wow.
Dude, I got a message like that earlier this morning. It's real.
Yeah.
And so that's why women who get the education and earn higher amounts, they don't need the man anymore for that piece, right?
Yeah.
And so this should be a screaming amber flash
Yeah.
to any man listening because this happens every single day. And I would say, Brad, like 70% of my clients who come to me say, I just woke up one day and my wife just threatened divorce, and I had no idea what was going on. I thought we were
That's
fine.
that was my story. That what the last
Exactly.
with the marriage before. It was
Mhm,
out of nowhere. Just,
mhm,
I'll never forget. She said, "I need to get away." I said, what do you wanna get what do you mean? We just got back from vacation. Why do you need to get away again? We had no children." And she goes, "No, I need to get away from you." I'm
mhm,
like, "Oh, that's a real tough one to take."
mhm,
Yeah, a little ego shot there. But yeah, it's an interesting but like I said, I learned so much from that. Learned so
mhm.
much, and unfortunately, I had to go through that, but, I also have an amazing wife now and 2 kids, so everything's kind of meant to happen in life.
Well, yeah, and you're better for it, right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
if you're interested, I'd be happy
Yeah,
to share a framework that I use with my one-to-one clients that can help.
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, now if you're a man listening, this is going to be hugely helpful for you. If you're a woman listening, it's still going to be helpful because you can help your husband in this journey. Okay, so it's called the Rise Conversation Ladder, and this is I want you to think about this as sort of like a ladder of like or rungs of a conversation, if you will, because a lot of these relationships, a lot of marriages are starved for depth, right? Not
Mhm.
because the husbands don't love their wives, but because they've forgotten how to talk to them in an emotional way. And so the reality is we can build a bank account, we can create a life schedule, but still feel like strangers passing in the hallway. So this framework is simple enough to remember on your worst day and powerful enough to change the way you connect forever. So the word rise, obviously it's 4 letters, RISE, stands for the 4 different steps. Okay, so the first step is R, which stands for routine. Okay, now this is the surface level of conversation. Okay, this is the base level. This is the small talk that you get into that runs the house, but never actually impacts the heart, right?
All
So
right.
questions that would be in this routine level are: what time are you coming home? Did you pay the water bill? What's for dinner? Right?
Right.
Now, these questions matter, but they're just at a functional level. But your marriage isn't an operations department, right? It's a covenant, it's a bond. And so,
Sometimes it feels like it with kids. I mean,
right,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
But this is why couples end up feeling like just really great roommates, because the conversations are just reminders, their errands, their schedules, all that stuff, right?
Are your kitchen and bathroom remodels a little overdue? Well, now's your chance to call First Response Contracting. John Sellers will take care of you. 484-256-7136. They do residential and commercial, and they're licensed and insured. Give them a call at 484-256-7136.
The next step to it is information. This is the next layer, or next layer deeper. And this is where you move from transactions to facts about your world, okay? Slightly deeper. So questions that are in the information level are: what happened at work, right? What did the teacher say at that parent-teacher meeting? Or what did your mom want when she called? How did that project wrap up? Now, at this level, you could think of you're exchanging news headlines from your day. It's better than nothing, but again, you're still reporting news, not revealing anything, right? So, but here you can think about this as being the on ramp, not the final destination. This is where most guys fall off the map, right here. They don't go further. Okay, and there's a reason why,
Totally. And
right?
this is where we normally say, "What do you mean? We just talked yesterday about this." Of course we talked. We had a great conversation about your mom.
hmm
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
So the third level here is S, and that stands for story. And this is where the walls start to crack open. Okay, so story moves beyond what happened to how it impacted her. Okay, this begins to pull emotions into those facts. This is where trust and empathy starts to grow. So examples of story-based questions would be: how did that meeting make you feel? Right? What was the hardest part of your day today? Not, hey, how was your day? What was the hardest part? Right? Another great question is: what do you wish I understood better about you that you're dealing with? What's something that you're dealing with now that you wish I would understand more of? Right? This is where you kind of have to drop your guard, and it gives her permission to drop hers too. Now, this is interesting because there was a clinical psychologist named Dr. Sue Johnson. She's written some brilliant stuff. She found that when couples regularly share feelings, not just facts, their sense of emotional safety increases by 80%. But here's why men kind of shy away from this, because when she starts talking about her feelings, you start to feel like you need to fix it, but you can't fix it, right? Because that's a feeling. And so you start to get uncomfortable. And what she wants you to do is hear her feelings without flinching. So it gets a little bit like, I don't want to hear about how she's upset, because now, but because my hands are going to be tied, right? I can't fix it. The fourth level, which is the deepest level, is E, and that stands for essence. Okay, this is where intimacy is born in a relationship when it comes to connecting with our wife. This is about meaning. Okay, this is the inner world where few people ever get invited to. This is where her fears live. This is where her spiritual questions live, where her wildest dreams live. So examples of essence-based questions will be: what's something that's been on your heart or your mind lately that you haven't said out loud? I mean, it's a deep question, right? And we
Whew.
wouldn't naturally think to ask that.
Yeah.
Or what's one thing that you're believing for or that you're praying for that you haven't told me? Or another one might be: what dream keeps tugging at you that you wish we talk about more? And one of my favorites is: what's one thing you'd love for our family to do, be, or see in the next 5 years? I'm throwing a lot at you, but this level is exactly what your wife wanted when she said, I want to feel close to you. If you've ever heard her say, I feel like I married a robot, or you never talk about your feelings, or we don't talk like we used to. This is the stuff that she's craving. Um, and the payoff here is real, obviously, but so is the risk, right? Because going here means that she's going to share fears again that you can't fix. She might share dreams that she has, like she wants to live in some beautiful house on the beach or whatever, and you're like, well, I can't afford that right now, right? And then you start
Mhm.
kind of strategizing or whatever, and it feels overwhelming, but that's okay, because you're not supposed to be her savior. You're just supposed to be her safe place, right? And that's the reality, is you need to be able to sit and listen. And so a real example, a real simple example of how this conversation could go. Say, for example, you guys get a sitter and you're getting ready to go
Mhm.
out on a date night or something, or go out to a friend's house for a party.
Yeah.
You're getting ready, and then the routine level question would be, what time are we leaving for the party? Basic level, right?
Yeah.
That's just like normal routine question. The information level question is, who's all going to be there? Right now, we're just exchanging information. Second level, or the third, story is, do you feel excited or anxious about seeing them? How do you feel about seeing all your friends? You see how we're getting into the emotions
Yeah.
here,
Mhm.
right? And then the essence level question is, what do you hope happens there tonight that will make you feel more connected to them, or to me, or to whatever, right? Deeper, 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 right? So this is kind of how that works. And so I share all that to say, it's so important, because like I said, 80% of the time divorces are initiated just because the wife feels disconnected emotionally from the man, and that's significant. There's a quote from David White. He's a poet and a philosopher, and he says, the conversation is the relationship,
Yeah,
right?
I've heard that before.
Yeah. If
I
you
don't know.
want
I saw that quote. Yeah, it's
Totally.
great. It's a
And
good
that's the
one.
thing, if you want to know the health of your marriage, look at the quality of your conversations. You think about it, Brad.
Yeah.
If you never ever talked to your kids, what kind of relationship would you have? Or if you never said, "Hey, how are you doing? How was your day?" And you just say, did you bring the bike in? Did you do the
Right,
chore?
right,
Did you What
right.
kind of relationship would you have? It would crumble pretty quick, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But we do the same thing in marriage all the time. And so what happens is, you might even go out on a date, but you don't talk about anything other than the schedule. And what happens is, your date nights feel like board meetings,
Yeah.
just with a bit of wine, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No,
And
it's so
so
true.
that's what happens is, and then we'll go out on a limb, and we'll say, no, I'm going to plan a date, and we go out on the date, but we ask the same dead end questions, and then and everything falls flat, and we both go home feeling unfulfilled, and then we get frustrated, and we say things, well, I keep trying, I went out on a date. Well, okay, but what did you do on that date?
Yeah.
Did you connect with her on an emotional level, or did you just treat her like an employee? Right? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And we do date nights when we can with kids. Do you find, and then we're going to have to wrap this up soon, but do you find that obviously I feel this way. Your relationship before you have kids is one thing. And then after you have kids, it adds a completely different element, I feel, to your relationship. Because I always say, I say this a lot, and my wife can't stand it, but when I say it, but is the you know, there's two people. There's my wife and there's the mother of my children. And they are they're just different. They're just a different people. And I don't know how else to say it. But that's the way I feel. I love both of them. They just react in different ways,
Mhm.
and I think that's one of the challenges. I think it's why a lot of times when people have children, they end up getting divorced because they can't keep their they can't see their wife anymore. They
Mhm.
just see the mother of the children,
Mhm.
and that is not what you married. You
Mhm.
married your wife. And, I don't know if you ever hear that or if that comes up or ever, but and I think that's it's important that you gotta keep that unit needs to still be solid in
Mhm.
order for there to be a good foundation for the family too.
Yeah, well, 100%. Because what happens is, the wife begins to feel like a mom, because that's what she is most of the day, and
Yeah,
she forgets what it feels like to be a bride. I love the
yeah,
word bride,
yeah,
because the
bride's
bride
good.
is like
Yeah,
beautiful, right? And so what happens is, she's a mom all day, and you come home, and you kind of end up sort of, she's in mom mode, and you never ever take her out of that mom mode. You
right,
never remind her about the fact that she's a beautiful woman, that she's your bride, that she's your wife, that you love, that you cherish. And so, and then also, depending on how you show up as a man, which we could talk about it in another time, but the wife ends up treating us like another child, because we're sort of acting like we're not taking full responsibility. We're not showing up. We're not, you know what I mean? And so
Sure.
she ends up becoming sort of both mother and father, and starts treating us like a child, right? And so I did a podcast episode about this a little while ago, and it was called "When Your Wife Becomes Your Mom." And this
Oh,
happens
wow.
all
Interesting.
the time, dude.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
that. Yeah.
And so I say this all the time, and it gets me in trouble. But people will ask me, "What do you want your son to know about you?" And I say, "I want him to know that he's number two." And they're like,
Oh,
Well, you can't say
that's
that."
so good.
I'm like, "Absolutely, I can say that, because it's my responsibility to show him that he's number two, because I need to model what a great relationship is. Because if he's got any shot at honoring and cherishing a woman one day when he grows up, then he needs to see that modeled for him. And our
Yeah.
marriage is his first classroom on relationships.
So true.
So
So
the
true.
first thing I need to do is honor her first. She needs to be the priority. And this is the problem we get into, is we put all the focus on the kids. I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many men have come to me and that I've coached, and they've said, I feel like my wife cares more about the kids than me. And
Wow.
that's a fair thing. That's understandable. But again, going back to our feminine nature, nurturing, caring for the relationship, caring for our children, it's just huge. But we need to understand how to communicate these feelings, because if we don't, we get caught up in all these traps, right?
Yeah.
And it's all of great intent. But if we don't know how to communicate through these challenges, this is where we run into problems, right? So I would commend you in saying that. Yeah, you're right, man. There's your wife, and there's the mother of your children. And it's important that you treat her as your bride, as her wife, because it's important that she feels like a woman, a sought after, honored, cherished, attractive woman from
Mhm.
time to time, because she can forget what that feels like too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Boy, it's just such good stuff, man. So good. There's a really good episode here. Just some things real quick before we wrap up. I love there was two quotes that you had put on Instagram that I just wanted to bring up. It hit me, and I wanted to say just the one was for couples: unspoken expectations are the fastest way to breed resentment. Your spouse isn't a psychic; they need your voice, not your silence. I love that.
Mm,
Very
yeah.
good, and then the other one, this was good. This has more to do with kids. This one almost teared me up when I was reading it the first time. Every bedtime story, every hug, every encouragement, every "I love you" is an investment in their identity. Stay focused, stay present.
Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome,
Mm,
awesome stuff. You're writing some amazing things. Anybody that goes to Instagram and reads through your quotes that you have and all the different messages in there, I think you will look inward at yourself when you read the quotes, and you'll see yourself in those quotes of either A, needing work with those quotes, or B, yeah, this is how I do things. But it's all good stuff, and I really really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, because it was awesome. So tell me, how do we get in touch with you? And tell me, they can hire you as a coach to help out with their relationships and their life and whatnot, right?
yeah, yeah, of course. Can I give you guys, your listeners, a free gift before we jump into that?
Absolutely, you can. We love free gifts. Free gifts are good.
Awesome. Well, I have something called, it's just called the connection code. It's 50 questions designed to spark the fun and bring the fire back. Now, by now, this long in the conversation, you shouldn't be questioning why it's important to connect with your wife on an emotional level. But this is legitimately, man, 50 questions that are designed to cover everything from your dreams, your life, your hopes, passion, intimacy, you name it. And the only rule is, when you take your wife out on a date, or maybe you put down the kids and you pour up a glass of wine, the only thing you can ask her that night are questions from this list. And it's totally free. And if you go to dadnationcode.com/code, or I'll give you the link and you can put it in the show notes, but just
That'd be great.
download it. I'm handing it to you on a silver platter. I get women emailing me all the time being like, who was that man that took me out on a date? Because he was asking me questions that just turned me straight on. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
that's
it's
cool.
it's
That's really
legit, man.
cool. Well, I
So
think
take
what
it.
we'll do is we're gonna have you back for sure, and, yeah, I think that's great, because there's so much more we didn't talk about. I have more
Oh,
notes on here. It's probably one of the podcasts for in a long time that I have more notes than I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to. So, it'll be good to get to that. But what else also? So, your Dad Nation, It's dadnationco.com is the website, correct? Or is
Yeah,
it
dadnationco.com. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And then the Dad Nation podcast, which we can find Spotify.
Yeah, I tell you what, if you just Google Dad Nation, you'll see my
Find all
face
kinds of
plastered
stuff.
around everywhere. But I do 3 things, and I'll say this I keep it real simple. I do content, courses, and coaching. Okay, so the content is just the podcast, all that stuff. I have some online courses you could do called the High Performance Husband, and then the coaching, which is the Dad Nation Coalition. But either way, man, whether it's free or you want some one-to-one service to walk alongside you as a coach, I'm here to support you, serve you any way I know how.
Awesome, man. It's awesome. Great stuff. I love it. I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll see you hopefully again in the next year.
Brad, listen, it's been a pleasure and an honor, my friend. Let's do it again.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Take care. All right. My goodness. Mitchell Osmond, the Dad Nation from Canada. Man, I'll tell you what an incredible show. That was really good. I mean, there's so much content there. I'm actually afraid for my wife to listen to this show. I'm a little nervous. I'm worried about what's going to
now. You're a better husband.
I'm a better
now,
husband now. That's right. A better father, too.
Yeah,
Exactly.
prepared,
All right.
man.
That's about it. Thanks for watching the show every Thursday, 7 p.m. We will see you again next week. All right. That's about it.